Hi everybody, my name is Anna, this is Wake Up Well, and today we're going to be looking a bit at 2 Corinthians 5 verse 13 to 15. And just to give a bit of context, this is Paul's letter to the Corinthians, and as most of us are probably aware, that Paul, ever since he encountered Jesus on the road to Damascus, his life was forever changed. He immediately just wanted to tell people that he had found the Messiah. He wanted to tell people who Jesus was, the love that he had for them, the significance of his death and his resurrection. He was a man on a mission, and that mission led him through hardship, it led him through suffering, it led him into the midst of persecution and often danger. And some, like in verse 13, even believers would look at him and think, oh, you're a bit excessive, Paul, and even commented that maybe he was a bit out of his mind. I mean, what would make a man run into places of suffering or places of hardship, or just continually telling about Jesus, even though it meant his life was put in danger time and time again? So some believers commented, oh, maybe he's out of his mind. But in verse 13 it says this: if we are out of our mind, as some say, it is for God. If we are in our right mind, it is for you. And that goes on in verse 14 to say this. Paul says, for Christ's love compels us. Other versions say Christ's love controls us. So for Paul, he couldn't do anything else. He was so possessed by the love of Jesus. He was so forever changed by that encounter that he had had with Jesus and his ongoing relationship with Jesus, that he couldn't do anything else but tell people about him. Even in a few of his other letters, he even comments and calls himself, I am a prisoner for the Lord. A prisoner of the Lord. And I mean, that's so countercultural to a lot of our language these days. We want to stand up for our rights. We want freedom to be able to do whatever we want. We don't really like the idea of giving over control to another. But here Paul's saying, I've given complete control. He could have taken control back if he wanted, but he's like, I've given my life completely over to Jesus. It is his love that compels me, that now controls me. Why is that? Well, it goes on in verse 14. Because we are convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died. I'm just going to read that again. We are convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died. We're so used to hearing the Sunday school narrative of Jesus died for us so that we could live and not have to die and be free to be with him forever. But here Paul is saying Jesus died for all, and therefore all died. You see, Jesus died so that we would die with him. Paul in Galatians 2 verse 20 says, I have been crucified with Christ, and goes on to say, no, it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And if we continue into verse 15, it says, and he died for all, Jesus died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. You see, Paul stood out for Jesus. He was even ridiculed by some of his own brothers and sisters in Christ as being excessive for Jesus, a little bit out of his mind. But he stood out for Jesus because he was so compelled by the love of Jesus. His life had been forever changed, that he'd given over full control. I just want to ask us a few questions today, and I ask them of myself as well. What compels you? What compels me? What controls our choices and our actions? Are we fully given over to the love of God? Are we fully in Christ, living for him, led by him in everything that we do? Or are we fighting to keep control of our life in some areas? Do people in our lives who know us look at us and say, oh, they're out of their mind for Jesus? Or do we so blend in with the way the world is? I was reminding as I prayed into this passage of just that analogy of when you're out at sea and you get caught in a riptide. The worst thing you can do is to fight for control, to get out, to try and swim, because you end up just getting exhausted and you're more likely to drown. The best thing that you can do is give in, give over control to the waves and allow them to take you out and bring you back in to land. And I just felt Jesus reminding us this morning that we need to yield to him again. Maybe we've been fighting for control in some of our areas. Maybe we're more led by what other people think than Jesus himself. Whatever it is, whatever he's speaking to you about this morning, I feel like he's calling us to lie back into the waves of his love, the waves of his presence. In the same way that we have that picture of baptism, of going down under the water, dying with Jesus and coming back, living fully in him. And today let's reset. Jesus, would you help us to reset? Would you help us to fall back into the waves of your love, the waves of your presence, that we would no longer live, but that Christ would live in and through us today and evermore.